So we are currently in the last subsection. You can see down here, the centers and initiation, um, which is the last subsection of this chapter entitled Motion and the Centers. Last time we began by taking a look at the actual process of initiation, mostly excerpts from the book Initiation, Human and Solar, uh, large tracts of which have been copied into a treatise on cosmic fire. Here, DK talks about the tremendous potency of the rod of initiation. Quote, the force of the rod is twofold, and its power terrific. Apart from and alone, the initiate could not receive the voltage from the rod without serious hurt. But triangular formation transmission, through triangular formation transmission, it comes safely. It then goes on to describe the two masters who sponsored the initiate, which represents the, quote, two polarities of the electric all. We then learned that the source of energy that the flaming diamond draws on comes from a very high level, even from beyond the solar system altogether during the sixth and seventh initiations. This is followed by a teaching on the rod used by the Christ at the first two initiations, and how this rod is periodically recharged during a great ceremony at Shambhala. And finally, we took a look at the office of the world teacher, uh, who has a relatively short time in office or tenure compared to that of the Manu and the Lord of Civilization. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So we'll pick up at the point where we left off, which is halfway through a footnote on the world teacher. Quote, the duration of his cycles, his meaning the world teacher, are not given out. The Buddha held office prior to the present world teacher, and upon his illumination, his place was taken by the Lord Maitreya, whom the Occidentals call the Christ. Historically, we know that the Buddha took incarnation in the 6th century BC, during which time he became illumined. Thus, according to this passage, it was during this time that Maitreya assumed the office of the Christ. Given these facts, the Buddha must have held the office of the Bodhisattva for 2,000 to 3,000 years before this, his 6th century BC incarnation, thus spanning at least the age of Aries. And that the Christ, who overshadowed Jesus 600 years later, actually took up the office of the Bodhisattva in 600 BC. It's pretty extraordinary information. By the way, always better if we have conversation, a dialogue, or trialogue, whatever works, than just me talking on my own. So, okay, we were, yes, Maria Christina.
Do you mind repeating what you just said?
Wait a minute. Yeah, I
The
can barely
length,
hear
the
you.
length of the Lord Maitreya holding office.
Okay, start again because your volume was very low.
Um, the Lord Maitreya holding office. Would you
Yeah.
repeat what you said? Would you
Oh,
just
okay.
repeat what
Well,
you said?
he came into office. This part of the footnote here tells us. Um, well, let me just reread that. The Buddha held office prior to the present world teacher, and upon his illumination, his place was taken by the Lord Maitreya, whom the Occidentals call the Christ. So, we know that the Buddha took incarnation in the 6th century BC, during which time he became illumined. So we know then that the Maitreya assumed the office of the Christ at the time, at 600 BC, not at the time of his incarnation through Jesus, or I should say his overshadowing of Jesus, at the zero mark between BC and AC, right?
Thank you. Yes, I just needed to hear that again. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so back to the text. So he's been describing these points having to do with the rod of initiation. The second point being the rod of initiation known as the flaming diamond and used by Sanat Kumara, the one initiator, called in the Bible the Ancient of Days. This rod lies hidden, quote unquote, in the east and holds the fire latent, which irradiates the wisdom religion. This rod was brought by the Lord of the world when he took form and came to our planet 18 million years ago. So the figure at left holding the globe found on the exterior of the Chartres Cathedral is the quote, Ancient of Days, a name for Sanat Kumara. So let's take a look at what MDR has to say about this passage. Could we get a volunteer to read this, please? Just raise your digital hand. Is your hand up to read, Maria Christina?
No, but I can,
Okay, then if you would.
and I will lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
I'm coming up to speed here. The flaming diamond must have some, can you hear me?
yeah.
The flaming diamond must have some relation to the planet Venus. For Sanat Kumara is said to have come to the Earth from the Venus globe of the Venus chain of the Earth scheme, a location obviously linked to the planetary scheme of Venus. The wisdom religion may be said to have had its commencement with the coming of Sanat Kumara to the Earth. The relation of Venus to the wisdom religion is easily seen. It is essentially the religion of the solar angels, of Venusian origin, from one perspective. If the flaming diamond irradiates the wisdom religion, then it is closely related to the one fundamental school of occultism in Shambhala, and may be considered to inspire that great source of unfettered enlightenment. The flaming diamond may belong with our Earth scheme and perhaps with certain other schemes which are developmentally comparable.
Thank you, Maria Christina. Any thoughts or questions about this? Anyone? Yes, Barbara.
So the diamond has both a cubic and a tetrahedral internal geometry. So, which is related to the carbon-based Earth. So I wonder if it's the activity of the geometry that's both matter and spirit and the interconnection of them that gives some of the power.
Well, that's a really interesting hypothesis. Yeah, we're looking at the how literal the diamond aspect of the flaming diamond is. We just don't know, but certainly has some relevance to that highest aspect of the mineral kingdom, which is the diamond, right? The most evolved aspect of the mineral kingdom. You could say the um, enlightened, vibrationally enlightened quality of the mineral kingdom. Um, I tend to think that it exists in first subplane etheric or atomic etheric substance, um, and that allows it to be grounded all the way down into the physical plane of the cosmic physical plane, the lowest of our planes, because it is constructed of atomic substance, and therefore is incorruptible, um, and can be wielded by one whose consciousness is at a much higher level. Um, it's There's some indication that its hiding place or its source is actually at monadic levels. But to more directly answer your question, I think there's an anchoring all the way down into the densest aspect of substance, um, uh, by this flaming diamond, because this rod is not only used to initiate human beings, but DK tells us, and I think it comes up today, um, it's used in other quote unquote planetary ceremonies. Like, for instance, I'm hypothesizing um, to initiate a certain chakra within the etheric planetary body, to intensify its activity, or possibly even, the to initiate a reversal of the poles. So it's not only human initiation that is used. It may be for that type of initiation, the diamond aspect of the rod of initiation, which would tie it to the deepest kingdom, the seventh mineral kingdom, would have particular relevance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, yes. I'm just looking at comments on this. Thank you, Ariane, for your comment. Ariane says, Maitreya is living in the world now in a body of light. He took on a Mayavarupa and descended from the Himalayas, entering Pakistan, then London on July 17, 1977. Okay. Yes, and Veronica.
Well, when we were reading here about the Venus chain and the Earth scheme, it gave me a sense of time, that these come from the future. And now you have done extensive work on the change and the chains and the schemes and all those things. But as I read that, I had a feeling that this has to do with time and time from the future, that this comes from the future. Just putting it out there, I don't know if it's of
Well,
any merit.
another way of saying that is it comes from beyond the realm of time and space, um, and that it's therefore applicable both in the past, the present, and the future. And I think that would be possibly a more accurate way to, uh,
Yes, that's very nicely put.
yeah. And I think these great beings who wield these rods, um, their consciousness is also beyond any kind of sequential time frame.
Yes, some way Master DK says, I don't know if you remember that the Master can go back and forth in time and see the
Mm.
whole, the whole time, the whole, I don't know what to say it,
Cycle, the whole cycle,
the
as
whole cycle of time. Yes.
yeah, see it as one. Yeah, which it essentially is. Yeah, in the Secret Doctrine, a master complains to Blavatsky about how cumbersome sequential time is, and that it's one of the the most onerous components of illusion, of the great illusion, right? That we're really hindered and hampered by it. Okay, anybody else? Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please? Raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll open my, thank you, Nadell.
Once in every world period, it is subjected to a similar process as that of the lesser rod, only this time it is recharged by the direct action of the Logos himself, the Logos of the solar system. The location of this rod is known only to the Lord of the world and to the Chohans of the rays. And being the talisman of this evolution, the Chohan of the second ray is under the Lord of the world, its main guardian, aided by the Deva Lord of the second plane. The Buddhas of activity are responsible for its custody, and under the Chohan of the ray, it is produced only at stated times when specific work has to be done. It is used not only at the initiating of men, but at certain planetary functions of which nothing as yet has been given out. It has its place and function in certain ceremonies with the inner round and the triangle formed by the Earth, Mars, and Mercury. But more about this is not at this time permissible.
Thank you, Nadell. So, first up, once in every world period, it is subjected to a similar process as that of the lesser rod. Only this time it is recharged by the direct action of the Logos himself, the Logos of the solar system. So all the rods of power are recharged by the immediately superior rod. That is to say, the rod used by the Christ in the first and second initiations is recharged by the flaming diamond. That rod, the flaming diamond, by the solar logoic rod of initiation, and etc. There are cosmic rods. One from Sirius, for instance, is used to recharge our solar logoic rod. I think he mentions that in this material. Yes, Nadell?
Would it be fair to say that these rods are all etheric substance and that they're essentially just channeling energy from the cosmic etheric planes or from the cosmic etheric down into our area?
Well, the answer to your first part of your question is a matter of opinion. I think the answer is yes. I personally think that they are formed from atomic substance, right? Um, and that they, the higher rods probably not, the physical plane of the cosmic physical plane, but only the higher etheric levels of the cosmic physical plane. Um, but the rod used by the Christ and the flaming diamond, my opinion, but he doesn't tell us, is that it that the rod itself is formed from the atomic substance of the physical plane of the cosmic physical plane, the lowest plane. The reason I say that is because Sanat Kumara is said to have taken incarnation at etheric levels, and that would mean physical plane levels. And if such a one as he, and after all, it is his rod, could take incarnation at etheric levels, then it's possible, certainly possible, that the rod that he wields also could be made from substance from that plane. And the other reason goes back to what I was discussing with Barbara, which is that in order to ground the potency all the way for certain, in fact, I think this, didn't he just, yeah, during the section that you just read, he talks about that it's used for other purposes. In order to be effective as to influence the etheric chakras of the earth, that it would be made of atomic etheric substance. But it's just a speculation. We can't know for sure. He doesn't tell us. Let's see. And the second part of your question, that was the first part. What was the second part of your question? Do you remember what you asked?
Just that being made of etheric substance, since the whole etheric is sort of plain as I understand it, it's just different grades of etheric substance that
Right,
it would
right.
channel that energy down into our world at
Yeah,
initiation.
yeah. I thought you had a second part of that question, but and I think that for cosmic initiations, that would be in the level of the sea of fire, which would be the first subplane of the cosmic physical plane, which is its own level of atomic substance, right? Not necessarily the physical aspect. But I think probably, uh, you know, I can't say for the solar logoic one, but certainly because he uses that to initiate planetary logoi primarily, and probably lesser logoi connected with the planetary logoi, like globe lords, chain and round lords, or those great beings that aren't scheme lords, but are highly placed in that realm of planetary logoi. Uh, and so my guess is that that rod is probably made of a higher grade of substance, like the first subplane of the cosmic physical, rather than the physical atomic substance. Nisa?
You know, I, when you were talking, what came to mind was, when you talk about planets being veiling and stepping down higher energy, it, it it seemed to me that there at least is a component of stepping down for us, like use the word, like human beings on the path, there's a component of stepping down the energy as well as stimulating the in the process of being touched by the rod at, no, at whatever level.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he tells us that it's made of two forces, one material and one uh, spiritual. And I think that's the physics of that stepping down, that it has to also have that uh, form aspect, that material component to it, energetically, in order to influence that which it's initiating. So even though it works differently than, for instance, the moon veiling a planet, which acts as a transformer of that energy into the realm, into the lower quaternary, right? Uh, it's it is also an agency of stepping down. Okay, let's see. Where are we here? All right, so next up, the location of this rod is known only to the Lord of the world, and the Chohans of the rays, and being the talisman of this evolution, the Chohan of the second ray is, under the Lord of the world, its main guardian, aided by the Deva Lord of the second plane. So extraordinary information. This passage brings up a lot of questions. For example, since the rod has a location, it must also have some sort of substantive existence, and thus it is not merely an invoked energy matrix that is dissipated after use. Since, and I've already covered some of this, but I'll just repeat it here. Since Sanat Kumara is incarnate on physical etheric levels, one hypothesis is that the flaming diamond has been fashioned from some first subplane physical etheric substance capable of withstanding and channeling shambolic fires. The fact that the rod is a talisman of this cycle of evolution further suggests that it has a tangible existence. Talismans are objects that are charged with particular magical properties and potencies in accordance with some specific purpose. The equivalent the etheric equivalent of a physical plane lock and key might be some sort of unbreakable magical mantram uttered by the Chohan of the second ray. The reason that its location must be hidden might be because there are lords, quote unquote, of cosmic evil that could wreak havoc if they were able to get their hands on such a rod. Okay, next. The Buddhas of activity are responsible for its custody, and under them, the Chohan of the ray. It is produced only at stated times when specific work has to be done. So, there are 3 layers of protection. The Buddhas of activity, the Chohan of the second ray, who is at this time Kuthumi, and the Deva Lord of the second plane, that would be the monadic plane. This latter guardian may give us a hint as to the rod's emanating source, that, the energy that it is channeling, because Shambhala has its energetic activity demonstrating on the monadic, the second cosmic physical plane. In these 3, we have a combination of first, second, and third aspect protection. Next, it is used not only at the initiating of men, but at certain planetary functions, of which nothing as yet has been given out. So I hinted at that before when in conversation. Such functions might include the magnetizations of certain areas of the globe, or re-magnetizing certain areas of the globe, or to initiate polar reversal. For instance, and also to initiate the end of a root race, both prematurely and when the root race has truly passed its proper amount of time. So I imagine the rod was used, for instance, to initiate the floods after Atlantis. And again, that would be one reason that it would be important that it has this etheric component to it. Yes, Barbara.
So the theory is that minerals have Devic intelligence, that they have guardians in the Devic kingdom, and to some sense, the mineral is actually formed from Devic essence. And the higher mineral crystals would have the influence of a higher deva. So I'm wondering if there's an internal intelligence in the flaming diamond that that is informational in addition to powerful.
Yeah, well, you paint quite a picture. You could just imagine that you have, starting with the elementals who actually, form this first subplane etheric substance of which the diamond is, flaming diamond is fashioned, from those elemental beings, and in a straight line of ascent up through the hierarchy of Davic beings, all the way up to um, the great Davic Lord who overshadows the second subplane of the cosmic physical plane. You have you're suggesting, and I think it's very likely that it would represent an unbroken line of Davic influence. Um, and I have to close my door. Hold on just a sec. And this, which would also very likely balance the human line, of which presumably Sanat Kumara stands at the head on our planet, and would be represented by the masters and the one being initiated. So yeah, that's a very interesting idea, that it would draw on the potency of an entire line of Davic beings, right down to the little elementals that make up the diamond itself. Okay. So next up, yes, Maria Christina.
I would just note that the diamond is known as the king of the crystals and symbolizes the central sun of our solar system.
Yeah, I think it's, you have this first and seventh ray connection, and first ray uh, demonstrates through uh, um, electric energy, right? And this is directly connected to the mineral kingdom. You have a dual first and seventh ray um, quality there. Okay, finally we have, it has its place and function in certain ceremonies connected with the inner round and the triangle formed by the Earth, Mars, and Mercury. We're still talking about the flaming diamond here, but more about this is not at this time permissible. So we're going to do a little mini tutorial here on this triangle of planets because it's quite important. So again, we have a statement that's copied verbatim from Initiation Human and Solar. The first mention of an Earth, Mars, Mercury triangle in a treatise on cosmic fire was back on page 181, as it provides a clue to the purpose of this triangle. Let's take a closer look. DK says, the second hint I seek to give lies in the triangle formed by the Earth, Mars, and Mercury. In connection with this triangle, the analogy lies in the fact that Mercury and the center at the base of the spine and the human being are closely allied. Mercury demonstrates Kundalini in intelligent activity, while Mars demonstrates Kundalini latent. The truth lies hid in their two astrological symbols. In transmutation and planetary geometrizing, the secret may be revealed. Now, this passage that we're just now reading, um, is referenced 3 times in esoteric astrology. The 2 hints, of which this is the second, both reference triangles that will be vivified by Kundalini fire. The first triangle, described back on page 180, which is formed between the Manu, the Bodhisattva, and the Lord of Civilization, is within the body of our planetary logos. Whereas this second triangle between the Earth, Mars, and Mercury is solar systemic in nature. Then, again back on page 181, DK says, in connection with this triangle, the analogy lies in the fact that Mercury and the center at the base of the spine of the human being are closely allied. What is meant by closely allied? Does it mean that the influence of Mercury actually stimulates a human being's Kundalini? Or does it just mean that Mercury is to the solar systemic Kundalini as the base of the spine is to the human Kundalini? The same question could be asked of the next statement. Mercury demonstrates Kundalini in intelligent activity, while Mars demonstrates Kundalini latent. The truth lies hid in their 2 astrological symbols. So again, we might ask, does this statement mean that Mercury and Mars actually stimulate active and latent Kundalini, which reside in the base of the spine chakra of a human being? Or rather that these 2 planets represent the active and passive Kundalini channels in the solar logoic Kundalini? When we look at the symbol for Mars in this context, it seems pretty obvious. The circle suggests the center at the base of the spine, that is, spirit which has been, in relation to Kundalini, embedded in matter, while the arrow suggests the latent but potential rising Kundalini. In symbol for Mercury, we have the circle of spirit surmounting the cross of matter, and the crescent of conscious receptivity surmounting the circle, thus suggesting that the Kundalini fire has been liberated and is intelligently and actively climbing. MDR suggests that Mercury represents the point in human evolution that stands beyond the 3rd degree, and that it is the ajna center from which the rising of Kundalini is intelligently directed. Also, the Kundalini is said to climb in figure 8s, as illustrated by the caduceus, which is closely, as we know, closely associated with Mercury. Hence the aptness on at least 2 counts of Mercury's association with Kundalini in intelligent activity. Yes, Maria Christina.
Sorry.
Are you going to speak, Maria Christina?
No, I said I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Not a problem. Okay, finally, in transmutation and planetary geometrizing, the secret may be revealed. So DK here gives us 2 methods of unveiling the secret of the Mercury-Earth-Mars triangle. First, transmutation, suggesting either that the particular makeup of these 3 planets in triangular formation evokes the energy of transmutation, or that in this triangle, the particular energy configuration characteristic of Mars are eventually transmuted into those found on Earth. Then the particular energies characteristic of Earth are gradually transmitted into those found on Mercury. In other words, a a demonstration of this sequential nature of transformation, right? From, for instance, physical plane consciousness to astral plane consciousness, and finally to mental plane consciousness. But again, we're left with this question: do these three planets in formation actually evoke this energy in us? Are they instrumental in making this happen for the human kingdom, or are they demonstrations of this in the solar logoic constitution? What is planetary geometrizing? Actually, we find many examples of this in the blue books. For example, in chart 6, shown at left, the hierarchical relationships between the planetary schemes is indicated through geometry. And in chart 7 at the right, hints as to the qualities and relationships between both the chains and globes is suggested by different specific geometrical relationships. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of sessions back, I showed you how these two charts relate, whereas this chart on the right actually is this circle in the chart on the left, and the lines that go out to the other planetary schemes exactly align with the lines shown in this chart. Okay, and we gain further insight as to the nature of the Mercury, Earth, Mars triangle in the following. Could we get a reader, please? Thank you, Aunt Veronica.
In the coming fifth round, our planetary logos will have attained the initiation which is his present goal. The fifth round of the Venusian scheme will be closing, and the Venus scheme will begin to pass into obscuration, preparatory to transferring her life to the synthesizing planet with which she is connected. Mercury will be reaching the apotheosis of achievement, and with Mars and the Earth will form a systemic triangle. We are speaking here of schemes and not of chains. We must recognize another triangle within the Earth scheme of the chains called the Earth chain, the Venus chain, and the Mercurian chain. But this triangle entirely concerns the centers of the planetary logos of our scheme. A systemic formation of great importance in the next round should be pointed out, which will bring three schemes, the Earth scheme, Mars, and Mercury, into such a position in relation to each other that the following results will evaluate. 1. A systemic triangle will be formed. 2. Logoic Kundalini will circulate freely between these 3 points.
Thank you, Aunt Veronica. So first of all, this passage tells us when this Mercury, Earth, Mars triangle will come into prominence. The coming fifth round is a distant event, following as it does the pralaya, which will occur after the last 3 globes of this round. During this coming fifth or Mercury round, the Mercury, Earth, and Mars schemes, not rounds, but schemes, will become a triangle of Kundalini fire in the solar logos, thus marking a particular stage of Kundalini activity, just as the formation of such triangles mark a certain stage of attainment in a human being. DK seems here to hint that this systemic triangle is the higher reflection of a triangle of chains within the Earth scheme, which interestingly is made up of Mercury, Earth, and Venus rather than Mercury, Earth, and Mars. Okay, back to the text. Any questions about this? Okay, let's take a look at the footnote, which states, the inner round is a mysterious cycle of which little can be told. It is not concerned with manifestation through the 7 schemes or globes, but has to do with certain aspects of the subjective life or the soul. So 2 points worth noting here. First, inner rounds are not connected with manifestation, but each scheme does have its inner rounds, as DK tells us on page 744 of TCF. The second point is that these inner rounds have to do with the subjective rather than the manifested life of the soul, suggesting an interior, probably monadic principle of the solar angels on their own plane, rather than their manifesting function as midwives for the 4th kingdom in nature. But the mystery only deepens when we consider the following. Can we get a reader, please?
Hey, Francis.
Yeah. Hey, Mikhail.
Sorry I was late.
It's all right. Go ahead, Joe.
I
It
I
looks
will
like,
read.
first of all, Mikhail, you set up the recording, right? Because when I went to click on recording, it says pause or stop recording.
Yeah,
So,
I have it set to auto record right when you first join.
yeah, good. So, right, because normally it would say record to computer or record to, the cloud or whatever. And so, but it was already set recording. So that was a good thing. Okay. So, Joe, what was your comment? Were you going to read or did you have a
I was
question?
offering to read.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead. Let's see. Wait a minute here. Yeah.
This inner round is followed only by a prepared percentage of humanity and is closely associated with a group who pass with facility and develop with equal facility on the 3 planets that make a triangle with the Earth, namely Mars, Mercury, and Earth. These 3 planets, in connection with this inner round, are considered only as existing in etheric matter and in relation to one of the heavenly men, hold a place analogous to the etheric triangle found in the human etheric body. I have here conveyed more than has as yet been exoterically communicated anent this inner round, and by the study of the human etheric triangle, its function and the type of force which circulates around it, much may be deduced about the planetary inner round. We must bear in mind in this connection that just as the human etheric triangle is but the preparatory stage to a vast circulation within the sphere of the entire etheric body, so the etheric planetary triangle, passing from the Earth to Mars and Mercury, is but the preparatory circulatory system to a vaster round included within the sphere of influence of one planetary lord.
Thank you, Joe. So, the page number kind of indicates how esoteric this information is. This is in the very last pages of Treatise on Cosmic Fire. So in this passage, we learn a bit more about both Mercury, Earth, and Mars, triangles of schemes, and the inner round, both this triangle of schemes and the inner round. First, a unique statement about, we might assume, small percentage of human beings who evidently sequentially incarnate on Mercury, Earth, and Mars, often enough to develop some kind of unique faculty that allows them to be associated with the inner round of some particular heavenly man, which heavenly man we're not told. Given what we learned in the footnote that the inner round has, quote unquote, to do with certain aspects of the subjective life or the soul, we might assume that this small group of humans must have reached a very high level of attainment in order to develop the sensitivity that would allow them to be consciously aware on a formless inner round. This statement brings up way more questions than it answers. For example, what qualities are developed by those who master the agenda posed by sequential incarnations on Mercury, Earth, and Mars? And which heavenly man's inner round is involved? This passage gives us a bit more insight. Can we get a reader, please? You can jump in, Mikhail, if you'd like. Maybe choose somebody.
Where were we, Joe?
Yeah, I was
Kirsten.
just taking volunteers. Joe was the last one.
Kirsten, you want to read?
Yes. The inner round, which carries with it vast opportunity for those who can surmount its problems and withstand its temptations. This inner round has a peculiar appeal to units on certain rays and has its own specific dangers. The inner round is a round that is followed by those who have passed through the human stage and have consciously developed the faculty of etheric living and can follow the etheric cycles, functioning consciously on the three higher etheric planes in all parts of the system. They have, for certain occult and specific purposes, broken the connection between the third etheric and the four lower subplanes of the physical plane.
Thank you, Kirsten. Well, we could really get into this. I mean, there's bound to be an association between Earth, Mars, and Mercury and these three highest etheric subplanes. And they're talking now about cosmic physical subplanes. But it's just some tantalizing hints that are given, not any extended substantive teaching on this. I also think we can assume that the triangle within the etheric body, this is really more important for us. Our etheric triangle, which DK discusses back on page 80, somewhere like that, it develops it, are directly influenced by these three planets. So they have to do with prana and with the circulation of prana in the solar system, and therefore in every unit within that solar system planetarily, and the kingdoms of nature throughout the solar system. That's what it seems to me, anyway. Okay, these three planets in connection with the inner round are considered only as existing in etheric matter and in relation to one of the heavenly men, hold a place analogous to the etheric triangle found in the human etheric body. So here is the human etheric triangle. Locations are just approximate, which we learned back on page 98, quote, the etheric body may therefore be described as negative or receptive in respect to the rays of the sun, and as positive and expulsive in respect to the dense physical body. The pranic emanations of the sun are absorbed by the etheric body via certain centers, which are found principally in the upper part of the body, from whence they are directed downward to the center, which is called the etheric spleen. So, in this passage, we've learned that Mercury, Earth, and Mars hold a, quote, analogous place to the etheric triangle found in the etheric body, the human etheric body. My best guess would be to put Mercury in the superior position because of its close connection with the sun, Mars in the position above the diaphragm because of its sixth ray association with the solar plexus, and the Earth with the spleen because of its third ray association with the foreman aspect. Just a guess, of course. Of these three, the Mercury placement seems the most likely. But this triangle is not, as we might suppose, the etheric triangle of the solar logos, but rather exists, quote unquote, in relation to one of the heavenly man, which it seems to me would have to be, first of all, one of the three synthesizing schemes. And of these, the most likely candidate is third ray Saturn, shown in the middle of this group of 7 schemes. Note in this chart where Saturn stands as the central synthesizing scheme that the triangles of Earth, Mercury, and Mars form a lower triangle, a perfect position for the functioning of an etheric triangle. Next, I have here conveyed more than has as yet been exoterically communicated anent this inner round. So, what has DK told us about this particular inner round that has never before been given out? First, a small, specifically prepared group of human beings who have trained on Mercury, the Earth, and Mars are or will be associated with the inner round. And 2, these 3 planets, which exist only in etheric matter in relation to this inner round, hold a place analogous to the etheric triangle found in the human being. So that's the great revelation given here by DK. Yes, Sam, Veronica.
Okay, all triangles are etheric. Why are we talking about this specifically etheric triangle? Is that its name?
Is that its name?
Yes, why are we talking about the triangle above the diaphragm, the throat, and the spleen? Couldn't it be any other triangle? When he says the etheric triangle, does he mean this specific triangle?
Yeah, he does. He's first of all, he's basically through this whole passage linking the influence of Mercury, Mars, and Earth within the solar system to the etheric triangle in a human being. He's saying that it plays the same part in the entire solar system as it does within the within a human being, thus suggesting that it represents the etheric triangle of the solar logos. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly, because I was asking the name etheric triangle. Why is it this triangle and it isn't any other triangle in the body?
Oh, because back on page 98, this triangle is exactly described.
Oh, okay. So when he says etheric triangle, he means this triangle, exactly.
Exactly. It is the triangle between 3 points, the spleen, which is shown here, and then a point below the diaphragm and a point between the shoulder blades. That's the triangle described back on page 98.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, Joe.
Difficult to describe. First of all, starting with Mars, we had some material this morning that says Mars is related to the base chakra, but later on, it will relate to the solar plexus. That brings us into this triangle, I think. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that Mercury is what we just say, not lesser, but relates to Uranus. And from my sense of it, it's potentially a triangle that connects to Uranus near the sun and then goes into the cosmos. It's very elaborate.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of triangles, and we're going to be getting into that, in the last half of esoteric astrology. But this is very specifically focusing on that etheric triangle, which is associated with the bringing in of prana, and the fact that these three planets are involved suggests their role in the etheric triangle, right? And their association with these three centers uh, in the triangle where a human being is able to gain and assimilate prana. Ariane.
So just to review, so the triangle that one is visualizing, it's the third chakra, which we don't usually want to energize, I don't think, because it's one that we want to, I thought, pull energy away from, because it's the
None of these
ego.
are chakras. None of these are the usual chakras.
Oh,
This is, yeah, these are, that I can see the confusion because he describes this pranic triangle. Well, let me just go back there and see here. Let's see here. Yeah. And then in the text, it's 8. Yeah. So the text quote is, the etheric body may therefore be described as negative or receptive in respect to the rays of the sun, and as positive and expulsive in respect to the dense physical body. The pranic emanations of the sun are absorbed by the etheric body via certain centers, which are found principally in the upper part of the body, from whence they are directed downward to the center, which is called the etheric spleen. And that's not the quote where he describes exactly where they are, but he does describe that one as being between the shoulder blades, another as being just above the diaphragm, and then a third, the spleen itself. And this forms the etheric triangle, which are other than the fundamental chakras, the main chakras. And then as a result of that, oh no, wait, I got to get back to where I was. As a result of that, I've formulated this positioning, right? So the highest one being associated with Mercury, the because of its proximity to the diaphragm, but this is just a guess, the Mars aspect, and then the spleen is associated with the Earth, but that's just an hypothesis, so we don't know that for sure.
yeah, I think we don't know enough to visualize, because I don't know if you remember, but a few weeks ago, people encouraged me very kindly to visualize that, because I have low energy. But I ended up in the emergency room in March and almost died, and I have a very large spleen now. So I don't know if it was related. I just share that sometimes when we, experiment with that, with different things, that we see a little bit of this knowledge, and we try to put it into practice, which I tried, and maybe I misunderstood something, but yeah, I have some serious health
Some real
issues.
problems. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And when you actually apply it to your own body, it always should be under the guidance of somebody who really knows what they're talking about, not just somebody who read something and therefore tells you to do it. That's always very dubious. I mean, learning about this stuff and actually applying it in healing is a very different thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, now they're talking about removing my spleen. So
Oh,
that's, I'm
sorry to
just
hear
really,
that.
yeah, I'm just letting you know that I know everything was done in the best of intentions, but and even just now I was trying to figure out if I could understand it. But I would just say that some of these things here are just like hints at higher knowledge, and we're like gripping at the garment of some greater being. And maybe we're not yet, or at least I'm certainly not able to apply it. I'm still alive. I'm under the protection of the masters of wisdom. I'm not saying that vainly. I'm just saying that I still have work to do here. And I'm not angry or upset at anyone by any means, but I'm just saying that in relationship to this knowledge, we cannot maybe put it into practice as we would rather.
Yeah, well, I certainly never suggested such a thing. And you'll never get that in any class that I give that you uh, visualize, an etheric triangle or whatever. This is, if you extrapolate that from the words given by DK, that's one thing. But yeah, as I said before, you really need to be under the guidance of a real healer when you do that kind of work. So.
Yeah, and I just want to, I shared that reticently because I don't want anyone, if anyone here was the one who suggested it, I don't want anyone here to feel bad. And I chose to experiment with this, and I'm fully responsible for my choices. And yet at the same time, I'm just giving that as a disclaimer. That's all. I wish everyone well here, and I express my gratitude.
Thank you, Ariane. Okay, hands. I see Nadell. Yeah, Nadell, go ahead.
I'm not clear about this idea of the inner round. Are
Right.
we talking about something other than the the scheme and the round and the chains that we're normally talking about? I'm just not clear about this whole idea of an inner round.
Sure. I'm really glad you asked that question because it does seem to be, taking second year math before you've finished with your arithmetic, right? Yeah. So the normal description of rounds is that there are 7 rounds in a chain, 7 chains in a scheme, right? And that those are um, uh, rounds wherein the 3 aspects are developed. First of all, through intelligent activity, or the third aspect, moving into the form world, and then at the midway point, whether you're looking at a 7 root races or 7 globes or 7 rounds, there's a midway point where you then begin to engage with the second aspect and move back towards spirit. That's the usual understanding of a round, right? Inner rounds have to do with that pralaic period, which is the period of non-manifestation that exists between periods of manifestation. So, you know, the normal teaching is just that there are 7 rounds, and then there's a period of pralaya, and then the life wave is transferred from round 1 to the new round 1, round 2 to the new round 2, etc., sequentially, right? Same thing with globes and chains, right? That it's transferred. Nothing is said about that pralaic period, but there is a little bit of teaching, and we've really touched on almost everything DK offers on this, just in these quotes I've given you, most of it at the very end of TCF, where the activity, quote unquote, because it's not the kind of activity we normally think of as activity, of that pralaic period is described. In other words, there is sequence during pralaya It's not just stasis or static, but we know nothing of it. He gives us those descriptions here. The inner round is following. Let me go back to where I started. Yeah. Yeah, he gives us hints. But he never just gives us a full rounded out teaching on the nature of the inner round. You get these kind of hints, right? But we are told, and Blavatsky mentions this too, that they, and this is a kind of illustration of it. You have the 7 rounds or globes or chains, units of cycles, cyclic units that are in the manifested realm, that are sequential A, B, C, D, which is where we are now. And then after G, you move into this grouping and you move into the most abstracted round, and then back down towards manifestation again. I've seen these described as either 3 or 5. This one shows us 5. And there's almost nothing said about them, except for that they're completely formless, meaning that they deal with the beingness nature of ourselves, the fundamental monadic reality of ourselves.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then what we're saying is that the inner rounds are periods during pralaya.
Yes.
We've been in manifestation, we're out of manifestation before we go back into manifestation again, say in another round of manifested round, we're in pralaya, and that's what's called the inner round.
That's, well, pralaya would be the entire period, and an inner round would be a segment of that. The problem is the language breaks down because there are no cycles in pralaya. There is no segment. It's a place of total unity. So you run up against the limitations of language in any kind of description of the inner realm, because we naturally work in terms of lower minds, A contemplating B, right? Point A and point B kind of contemplation. None of that exists in the inner rounds. I mean, logic tells us that it must be developmental in some way. But if so, it is one which involves only the spirit aspect. There is no form aspect. For instance, he gives us maybe the most, is it here that he talks about? No, I'll just go from memory. He talks about where these few human beings that involve themselves, this small group, which are conditioned somehow by incarnating on Mercury, Earth, and Mars, that work as souls on the inner rounds, because after all, we are essentially our our soul selves. Our true selves are our souls. So that gap will have had to have been closed before one can participate on the inner rounds. And so my guess is that the functionality is to reunite with the monad in that work on the inner rounds. But again, I'm working with very little information. He tells us, has its own specific dangers. For instance, see, it says, passed through by human stage. Those participate have passed through the human stage and have consciously developed the faculty of etheric living. And of course, we're talking here about the higher four subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, the lowest of which is the Buddhic, right? And therefore have completely severed their connection with the lower quaternary. So yeah, those are just some hints about of that very little talked about reality of the inner rounds. Anyone else? Okay, I have no idea where we were. Let's see here. Yeah, we were here on this diagram. We looked at that. Um, okay, next. And by the study of the human triangle. Sorry, guys, hang on a sec. Yeah, here we go. And by the study of the human etheric triangle, its function, and the type of force which circulates around it, much may be deduced about the planetary inner round. Okay, the function of the etheric triangle is to receive, assimilate, and transmit prana. The type of force is solar prana, or quote unquote, the vital essence from the sun. In this passage, DK makes a direct connection between the purpose of the inner round of a particular heavenly man and circulation of solar prana by means of the pranic triangle made up of Mercury, Earth, and Mars, or the influence of Mercury, Earth, and Mars, depending at what level we're talking. The more I think about it, the more I think this heavenly man has to be Saturn, because Saturn is the synthesizing planet of the third aspect, which prana serves to vitalize. So, from all this, we might hypothesize that the particular Saturnian inner round receives, assimilates, and transmits prana by means of the Mercury, Earth, and Mars etheric triangle to the dense form aspect of the solar system, and that there is a select group of human beings from all three of these schemes who train on these three planets to assist in this work. And then finally, we must bear in mind in this connection that just as the human etheric triangle is but the preparatory stage to a vast circulation within the sphere of the entire physical body, so the etheric planetary triangle passing from the Earth, Mars, and Mercury is but the preparatory circulatory system to a vaster round included within this sphere of influence of one planetary lord. So, in both the human and solar systemic etheric sheaths, the etheric triangle represents a preparatory stage, meaning that pranic circulation initiates or makes possible later triangular circulations of Kundalini fire. From this, we might conclude that through the circulation of prana around the three planetary schemes that make up the pranic triangle, this Saturnian round initiates and sustains an expanding energy circulation within the solar system, which will eventually express itself through various planetary triangles. Let's see if I can just paraphrase all that. Our very first triangle to be activated, it has nothing to do with advanced consciousness, except for that being within the human kingdom, is this pranic triangle. And that the circulation within that triangle makes possible the advancement of the Kundalini fire into other triangular formations. And what he's saying here is that that's also true for the solar system, right? And that there's this pranic triangle circulating between these three planets, and that eventually that leads to the energizing of other uh, planetary triangles as the Kundalini rises in the solar system. Okay, Nisa?
Recently, I was listening to somebody on a podcast on YouTube, and she referred to wonky triangular formation. I can't remember what planets were involved, but it was like a square, let's say, in a triangle, or a trine. It wasn't like a grand trine or a grand, anything. It was, but they were in triangular relationship. I think well, I want, it doesn't matter what the points were, but in when planets are in a relationship that is triangular, even if it's like a wonky triangle, like she says, um, is there, what might one be looking at in view of this? Let's say you see the Earth, Mercury, and Mars, you know, in some sort of a relationship point in for consciousness. What would you speculate? Um,
Well, this particular triangle, it has specifically to do with this etheric triangle, which brings in prana, right? So it's very specific. These triangles have specific purposes, and you can have other purposes assigned to the same three planets in context to another energy field. This one just happens to be, uh, relevant to both the human being and to the solar system as a whole. Because remember, he said that Mars has a definite connection to our base of the spine chakra as uh, as latent Kundalini energy, and that Mercury has uh, a relationship to the spine center as active uh, Kundalini energy. Now, when you look at the fact that it is both of those also appear in this pranic triangle, you can see the connection that the stimulation of that lower chakra begins by the circulation of prana, activating gradually the Kundalini energy that expresses itself through energetically through these planets. So, it just depends on uh, which planets and in what context you're talking about. But triangles, it forms a whole second half of the book in esoteric astrology. And it is the fundamental pattern for energy exchange.
so we're going to delve deep into this actual concept of how, excuse me,
Yes.
how these energy flows
Yeah.
affect humanity and the planet and the cosmos, I guess, in general, but which doesn't mean much to me, but you know,
Right.
but we're
Yeah.
gonna,
It always comes in triangular formation. And this, it can expand on this. For instance, you can have a triangle with a dropped line of influence, where the triangle then influences a fourth body, but the potency is in the triangle of connection itself. Okay. Ba, 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 ba. Sorry, guys. All right. Okay, so let's get back to the text. Let's see, make sure I covered all this. Okay, so back to the text, where DK continues his description of the rod of initiation, and this is his third point on this. Can we get a reader, please? Oh, Mikael, you want to choose a
Yeah,
reader?
Maria Christina, you want to read? I think,
I already read, but I
He
can.
read.
okay, Nasa.
Third, the rod of initiation, wielded by the logos of the solar system, is called, among other things, the sevenfold flaming fire. It was confided to our logos by the Lord of Sirius and sent to our system from that radiant sun. One of its purposes is for use in emergencies. This great talisman has never yet been employed in this particular manner, though twice it was nearly thus used, once in Atlantean days and once in the 3rd year of the late war. This rod of power is used at the initiation of the 7 heavenly men on cosmic levels. It is used also in the initiation of groups, a thing almost incomprehensible to us. It is applied to the centers of the 7 heavenly men in the same general way as the lesser rods are applied to the human centers, and the effects are the same, only on a vaster scale. This, needless to say, is a vast and abstruse subject and concerns not the sons of men.
Thank you, Nisa. So we're out of time. We'll pick up with this after the conference.